Welcome, friends and neighbors, comrades, relatives, all you citizens of the world. It's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James here in Chicago. This show is for the 14th of January. We are recording it on the 11th of January. So our news that we might report may not be quite up to the moment, but it's worth hearing about. We've got a couple of good guests today. We're going to focus on sports and injuries, that kind of thing. We've got a champion bull rider coming on because Professional Bull Riders Association is here in town in Chicago this weekend. And we also are going to talk to an old pal, Dave Meggysey, about football. He knows a lot about it. He played ball for 7 years for the St. Louis Cardinals pro team and wrote the great book Out of Their League. So stick around for the next hour, and we're going to have a good time. One good thing to start off with is something I got from the Green Bay Press Gazette, and it says tribal nations reintroducing bison in Wisconsin. More bison are returning to Wisconsin to be managed by a tribal nation. The Menominee Nation this winter received 10 bison through partnership among the South Dakota-based Intertribal Buffalo Council, the Nature Conservancy in Illinois, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Says right now it's time to introduce the whole idea of bringing bison back on the prairie. They played a role at one time in our culture. The bisons have about 66 acres to roam between pastures on the Menominee Reservation. Much of that land had once been a non-tribal farm that used chemicals. Under tribal management, a restoration process that includes the indigenous technique of prescribing burning is bringing back native grass for the bison to feed on. That's great, and some of you know this show, know that we know the Wild Idea Buffalo people out in South Dakota have visited there, and they are doing that similar process about bringing back the prairie. Some bad news is following up on basically the coup in Peru, where the President Castillo has been moved out. I'm not sure what his situation is, but I saw something really in Counterpunch that had video of protesters being shot down by soldiers from helicopters. That's in Peru. We are really glad to report that here in Illinois has become the 9th state to ban assault weapons after Governor Pritzker signed the historic legislation following the House passage this past Tuesday. So if you want to go buy a gun of that caliber, an assault weapon, can't do it in Illinois. That's a good thing. On politics. We got a little notice, actually an email from Congresswoman Katie Porter in California, and she's a progressive on the left-leaning side, and she reports that she is going to not seek re-election for Congress, but is going to go after the Senate seat held currently by Dianne Feinstein. And Feinstein says she's seeking re-election, so this will be like a little bit of a struggle between the progressives and the not quite as progressives. Here in Chicago, we've got a big election coming up, and that would be for our next mayor. Whether it'll be Lori Lightfoot or someone else, there's going to be an election on February 28th. If no one gets 50% plus one, it'll go to a runoff on Tuesday, April 4th. And for those of you who are listening to this on the radio version, which would be on Saturday morning, the 14th on WLUW 88.7 or streamed on WLUW.org, you might want to know about the Chicago Women Take Action Alliance Forum, a mayoral forum that is being held today at the Chicago Temple at Clark and Washington. And I'm not sure of the start time, but all nine of the 10 candidates are going to be there. Alderwoman Sophia King, Alderman Rod Sawyer, Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, Cook County Board Commissioner Brandon Johnson, Mayor Lori Lightfoot, State Rep Cam Buckner, former CPS head Paul Vallis, and the entrepreneurs Willie Wilson and Jamal Green. They're going to take part in a 2-hour session. It'll be moderated by Cheryl Corley and Carol Marin, and it'll be good. And we did get a call back from Chuy Garcia, and he will be coming on the show. We'll let you know. Another little thing that if you're listening this morning on the 14th, we were in contact with a woman named Susan Mills, she's a longtime immigration attorney, activist, lives in Vermont. She has a new book out called On the Wings of a Hummingbird. And she has 2 book readings coming up, one January 19th at the Pilsen Community Bookstore, and the second one is January 21st at the Uptown Public Library. She'll also be featured on our friend Bill Ayers' podcast, which I believe is called Under the Tree. On the sports front, we're going to have Dave Meggysey talking football, and we're going to talk to someone we haven't met yet but are looking forward to it, Keyshawn Whitehorse, 2018's Professional Bull Riding Rookie of the Year. And now for some sad news. Last week, I got notice that Norm Fruchter had died. A little bit later, I got notice that Casey Hayden had died. And then I found out that my friend Art Davis had died. So a bit about all 3 of them. Art Davis was a friend of mine. I knew him from Uptown back in the old days. And he was my roommate for a time, particularly in '76 when we opened the Heartland Cafe. He was the first head cook, chef, if you will. Art knew how to cook. His mom she was Japanese. She was married to a GI named Davis. Her name was Sagamaki. And she had a restaurant on Clark Street. And Art came into that Heartland kitchen, took command, taught us a lot about stir fry, et cetera, did tempura, a lot of things that ended up on the Heartland menu and some that didn't. He went to work for Alderman O'Connor for many years. I talked to him a little over a year ago, it turns out. Seemed like yesterday, and he wasn't feeling so hot he'd get back in touch with me. And after sending him some emails and not hearing back, I called around and got that news. On Friday morning past, I got a news that Norm Fruchter had died. Norm Fruchter was a filmmaker, an activist for education in both New York City and in Newark. He was one of the founders of the STS's Economic Research and Action Project, that particular one called the Newark Community Union Project. And unfortunately, he was hit by a car in Brooklyn where he lived and died 2 weeks later. And on top of that, a few minutes after I learned that an old close friend, Casey Hayden, had passed away. And Casey Hayden was one of the first white women to work in the civil rights movement in the South. She was around for the founding of STS. She was a longtime SNCC worker. I got to know her when she was spending a summer working at Joint Community Union. She went on to do a lot of Zen work, a lot of gardening work, was real active, has a long history. If you Google Casey Hayden, you're going to get a lot of information about a wonderful woman. So I'm real sad about all 3 of them. They all did good in the world, and just remember their names: Norm Fruchter, Casey Hayden, Art Davis. Okay, last week we had our friend Ivan Handler on talking about biodiversity, and you can get the whole show from last week at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos, but you can also get separate interviews and another guest we had last week, Corinna Fales. So those are both worth watching. They're both up on the YouTube site. So we're going to take a little break. I think we're going to hear some music from the Native American band Exit, the Crossing of Indian Tribes, who we brought to Chicago many years ago. And then we'll be back with our first guest, who will be Keyshawn Whitehorse, the bull rider. Be right back. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. Well, good morning, Keyshawn. I hear you're stranded out near Durango, Colorado, because the FAA canceled a lot of flights. So you're headed to Chicago for the Professional Bull Riders Association event. Tell us a little bit about it.
So I believe it's the sixth event of the season for the 2023 Unleash the Beast season. They'll have 2 long rounds, a short round, and also 15-15 come Friday and a Saturday night. And it's going to be a great venue, great event. It's usually a great venue each and every year, and us riders usually enjoy it.
Oh, that's good. For people who are listening in on the morning when we do broadcast this show on Saturday morning, you could still catch this event. It's out at the Allstate Arena in Rosemont. And I remember seeing the Grateful Dead there and Bob Seger there, but I've never been to a rodeo there. This will be a first time. So, Keyshawn, you were the Rookie of the Year in the PBR. In 2018. You're still a young fellow. I think you have a ranking of about 15th. How do you stack up in the competition these days?
You know, bull riding and any other sport's a young man's sport. So I'm 25 years old now, and I was 21 whenever I rode won that Rookie of the Year. So I'm kind of considered like a veteran, but kind of coming into my prime as well. You know, with the youth that I have right now, and then on top of the experience. So I'm kind of in a good spot right now in my career, and from right now until about getting towards 30 is kind of the prime years of that knowledge, and as a man, your physical health is peak. So I'm in a good spot right now of progression and becoming an even better rider.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm turning 81, and I don't think I'm ever getting on a bull, though I do hope to get on a horse again. What's the toughest, roughest bull you ever rode? And did you ever ride any of the champion bulls in riding the last few years, riding solo, Whoopa, and Smooth Operator?
The only I've got on riding solo once and Whoopa once. I bucked off Whoop Off fairly quick, and then Bout rode riding solo. I've rode a bull called Chiseled. He was a champ before, and back in 2020 I rode that bull, and rode another bull called Pookie Holler, which when I did ride him, at that moment in time he had an unridden streak going on. So I've faced up and matched up against some really good bulls in my time. But yeah, it's always exciting, and I look forward to those matchups because it's going to be a dogfight.
Yeah, well, uh, I was reading somewhere, actually, there's a really good article in the New York Times this past week, basically talked about how the bulls have been bred in such a way that they're really getting harder and harder to ride. They, some of the talk in the article was that it's actually the mother of the bull that might have more of the bucking properties than the bull itself, the father. But they talked about how these bulls are getting really harder to ride, and that the percentage of time that the riders stay on has decreased, although it went up to about 30% this last year. But what do you know about the bulls over the last 4 years that you've been riding on the circuit? Are they getting tougher and stronger and harder to ride?
I believe the consistency over the field is definitely there versus, before you might just have one tough one, two, or just a handful of bulls that are kind of tough. But I feel like right now the consistency of bulls that are really bucking hard or really athletic is definitely broadened. So you're running into them a lot more often, and that's why the percentage goes down. Riding percentage goes down is based off of that. But within the past few years that I've ridden on tour, it's been like that, and it only continue to be like that. So as riders, you got to adjust and you got to get better and better as the bulls get better and better as well.
I remember in my own life in the late 40s going to Madison Square Garden and seeing the rodeo. And I don't remember the bull riding. I remember a lot of horses. Is that the sport itself really has taken off in the last 10, 15 years, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, rodeo and stuff like that was the first, like the original sport here back in the day in the U.S. So I feel like a lot of things are kind of going back. But I mean, Madison Square Garden, they've had rodeos there for years, even though people will get an unexpected, like wonder why that has happened. but it just grows even more mainly because we visit bigger cities. I mean, like I said, we're going to Chicago and we visit Sacramento, California, Anaheim, California, and in Dallas, Texas. I mean, we go places where there's big cities and lots of people, and where they maybe generally don't see rodeo as much because it's a Western lifestyle, and Western lifestyles tend to be more rural than actually within the city limits.
I'm remembering all my experiences with bulls these days, and I remember as a kid and growing up in Connecticut when the pickup truck would show up with this bull, and they'd let the bull loose in the field with a bunch of cows. It was quite an event, and but that bull certainly wasn't anywhere near the size of the bulls that you ride. I'm wondering about your own experience as an athlete. What kind of training do you do? I've seen pictures of you working with the ropes. I've seen pictures of you running. Talk about your diet, talk about your training, and staying in shape to do this task.
So for me, it just varies. My weight fluctuates throughout the season. It's obviously tough since we're always on the road and whatnot. So I mean, my caloric intake varies from 2,500 calories to 1,500 calories, depending on whether how much weight I've gained or trying to maintain or trying to lose some weight throughout the season. My training wise just kind of consists of obviously I do a lot of strength training with kettlebells, dumbbells, barbells, just like any other sport, stretching and just overall, just it's a main athletic standpoint of just trying to be as athletic and then healthy as you can throughout the season.
I'm thinking about what it must be like when you're on a bull. I never even got on one of those bull machines at a bar, but I'm wondering what goes through your mind. And are you conscious of what your moves you're making, or is it just kind of instinct? Do you ever get yourself in the zone? That the athletes talk about being in the zone where things are going right and working the way they want to, kind of a higher consciousness. What's the sensation for you when you're on a bull?
Yeah, we all as bull riders and as athletes, everybody gets in the zone and knows what's happening in that moment in time, and everything slows down, even though it may be very fast. Um, yeah, there's times where when I ride, I can think of exactly what the bull's doing and pretty much know what he's gonna do next, or then even maybe not even there. Like I'm riding a bull and everything seems to be becoming very easy and clicking easily that I'm not even thinking about that moment. I'm thinking about what I might be having for dinner later or anything like that. And there's times where it's hard to be in that zone, and for some reason you can't click in it, and no matter what you do, you can't get in it, and everything seems just as fast as everybody else sees it, and as crazy as everybody else sees it.
Keyshawn, what's the first bull you rode, and what led you to be a bull rider?
My first big bull was in a rodeo school back in 2009 in Colorado, and but before that, I got on like calves and sheep and steers and stuff growing up to progress. But I saw it on TV when I was about 5 years old, and I just knew that's what I wanted to do.
Nice. I'm wondering, you're Native American. I think you're Navajo or Dene, however you prefer to be called. I'm wondering what it's like on the bull riding scene. I mean, it's not just white cowboys anymore. There are plenty of Brazilians on the circuit, and there certainly are been a lot of African American black riders. Ezekiel Mitchell comes to mind. What's it like on the scene among the riders and particularly among people, so-called minorities, Native American, Black, or Latino?
Yeah, I think I believe where we're at in our riding in our locker room for the most part, everybody's there because they're good enough to be one of the top 35 bull riders in the world. So there's not much bias in anything. Everybody respects each other and understand each other there in the locker room. We all get along, and we're all there for one job, and that's to try to be the best. So it's good to see, other people from other backgrounds, and it helps each and everybody learn about each other a little bit more and understand our backgrounds, where we come from, our cultures, and you start to become friends with more people.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm an old guy. I go way back. I knew a number of people from the American Indian movement who were at Wounded Knee, was involved with them on stuff here in Chicago. I brought the Native American band Exit, Crossing of Indian Tribes in, visited out there with Wilbert Sosi in Farmington, New Mexico, when they were having some demonstrations. I'm wondering if you are influenced by the struggles of Native American people, the Dakota Access Pipeline demonstrations, Native Americans turning out to vote in Arizona and New Mexico in the last presidential election. Any thoughts on any of that?
For me, like I always support my Native American people, and I'm always all for for my people. So when it comes to different things in mind, I always have to back my people in a lot of things, and because I know that they support me in what I do, and they're willing to take my side and help me reach my dreams, my potential within my sport, and they're always going to be wholehearted with that. So when it comes to situations that affect my people in a negative way, I do like to make sure I am knowledgeable about it and try to help out in which way I can.
Keyshawn Whitehorse, tell us a little bit about your hopes and your dreams for the future, for yourself, for Native people, for all people.
The main thing for all people is just to hopefully they can accomplish whatever dreams and desires that they have. And for the Native American people, I like them to continue to be strong and resilient, keep pushing forward in their life, and know that they can do anything that they put their mind to. And then for myself, I look forward to becoming the best version of myself that I could possibly be.
Oh, that's good. Do you happen to know the names of any of the bulls you're going to be riding this weekend?
As I know right now, the only bull that I know that I have drawn is in the 15th. They're still working on the rest of the rounds, but I do have world champion Lucky Bull riding solo in the 15th.
Keisha, let me ask you, is there a kind of a minor league for professional bull riders? I'm just thinking about, I've seen various rodeos, small rodeos, like I think Kankakee, there's an outfit of black cowboys, and that was the last rodeo I went to. I'm just kind of interested in how the sport develops and how people move up in the Bull Riders Association.
Indeed, they do have lower divisions. They have the Velocity Tour and Twine Pro, and then during the summer they'll have Challenger tours. So there's different tours that help riders progress to become in the top 35 in the world. But in the Bulls and the Bull Power isn't as strong. Interplay baseball and stuff, but those are developmental leagues. More so, the Velocity Tour is that developmental league where guys are there. They might be there for a little while.
You know where you're going next? I mean, what's the circuit? It seems like there's something going on every weekend. It's like playing a football game every weekend.
Yeah, so this weekend is Chicago, Illinois, and then the weekend after that will be Duluth, Georgia, followed by Indianapolis, Indiana, by the end of the month of January, and then going into the new month of February, Sacramento, California. So yeah, I know a little bit. Just try to keep the event schedule though kind of one at a time, so my mind stays focused at what's ahead of me, right in front of me.
How are you doing this year? Where are you fitting in the standings?
I'm 15th in the world right now. Uh, Currently, I was up higher in the standings, had a few weeks of trouble, but work my way back up and just trust the process and keep going ahead.
How about your relationship with the Bulls? I assume this is. I think I read somewhere the Bulls. They're bred to buck and twist and turn and jump but they're actually pretty mellow and friendly. I don't know if it's like Ferdinand the Bull story, but what's your take on the Bulls? What's your vibe with them when you're getting on and making the adjustments with your rope in your hand and the glove? What's going on for you?
For the most part, I try to stay calm, cool, collected. A lot of times, these bulls and a lot of bulls, majority of bulls, they're pretty calm and mellow bulls, especially out in the pasture, and they know that, but they know their job there at the bull riding arena. So they're just like us. They have adrenaline going, and they get amped up. And sometimes that's when you see them jump around in the back and stuff. But there are some bulls that are just purely mean. They have an attitude like that, and some are wilder than the others. But my job in my area is to control only what I can actually control. So I try to stay calm as I can because the animals feel that energy coming from you. So I try to make sure to stay calm, cool, and collected. And
Well, Keyshawn Whitehorse, it's good talking with you, and I'm wishing you a lot of luck. I hope I get to meet you out there this weekend. Let me ask you in our closing moments here on Live from the Heartland, any parting thoughts you have for all of your fans here in Chicago?
I appreciate my fans' support there in Chicago and in the show. Hopefully, I can put on a good event for y'all. And then looking into this new year, I hope you guys accomplish all the dreams and goals that you have at hand in front of you.
Okay, brother, right on. And thank you very much. It was great talking to you. I hope I get to see you in person sometime, hopefully this weekend. And we really wish you continued good luck on the professional bull riding circuit. We know you're a hell of a guy just from reading about you and talking with you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Welcome back to more Live from the Heartland here for the 14th of January in the year 2023. We just did an interview with Keyshawn Whitehorse, a bull rider, and we had trouble because the planes were grounded out there in Durango and all over.
Oh, no kidding. Well,
and we did get him on by audio, and he was in the airport. I'm not sure how it'll work out, but we now are going to continue with our show with an old pal, someone who's been on the show and has had thousands of views over the years. The one and only Dave Meggysey.
Oh,
good morning, David.
Oh, that's me.
How are you? Good to see you.
The one and only Michael James. Yay.
Well, with Damar Hamlin being injured the other day and the world, or a lot of people being riveted to the TV, concerned about him, I called you, we talked, and I said, how about you come on and we'll talk about football.
What I want to do is just first, the audience, Michael, Mike James, Michael and I have longtime friends, 50 years. And when I was playing football, professional football at the St. Louis Cardinals, and we had our training camp was in Lake Forest, Illinois, north of Chicago. And I met up with Mike in Chicago, and it was the first time we connected. And with my friend Rick Sortune, who was a player, a fellow player who's dead now, actually, a very good guy and a union guy all his life. So that's just to say we have been connected for a long time.
I remember the very day when you and Rick Sartoon were walking down Clifton Avenue. He had just been visiting with Peggy Terry, who went on to run for vice president with Eldridge Cleaver on the freedom ticket in '68. So this was around 67, 68. And I remember meeting you and then going down to St. Louis later and being at your house with Dr. Spock and doing a lot of stuff. But, the one thing I want to say about Lake Forest football, we were no powerhouse, but I did play.
And he was a player.
We got to wear the Cardinals' old equipment, like, shirts and T-shirts and jock straps, who knows what. But anyhow, that was my first connect with you. So we go way back. We're close friends. We've done a lot of stuff together. I'll try not to get into all the little stuff today, but let's talk to Damar Hamlin and what that triggered for you, David.
Well, I think that, it triggered again, the game itself. And we maybe, because we have some time now, we can really talk a little bit about it. And it was kind of a freak um, injury, but basically he when he got slammed, his heart stopped, and he would be dead. And then the guys really mouth to mouth and pushing on his chip, banging on his chips, got his heart revived, and so he's now I think he left the hospital.
Yeah, he's
But,
out of the hospital in Buffalo today.
Yeah, and so but it was pretty dramatic because they had to cancel the game, and because and I think it was really driven by the players and their concern for a fellow player that was on death's door, basically, and then the league finally realized what's going on. The players will not want to play this game, and so they canceled basically the game. So, but I think that yeah, it was tragic. But on the other hand, it comes up again what this game is about, and the amount of violence that is central to the game. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the history and how it happened. And but it is a very, very popular game now. It's of the 100 shows last year, top rated shows, 885 of them are NFL football, by the way. So that's a big chunk. And looking at now just the playoffs, there's 130 million hits just about the game, the games that are happening next week or this weekend.
Yeah,
So,
I would always talk to whenever I've been involved in progressive organizations, and they would always be scheduling meetings during some major sporting event, and I said, "You can't do this. You can't do it." Dave, let me go before we go on to talk about football. I
could be babbling away here. Okay, go ahead.
Let's talk. Both of us are babblers, but we're together and we're doing it on our show. But let's talk about the medical response because there's always people on site. It seems like the NFL have been prepared for this kind of thing. So I'd like to hear your response, and I'll just do a little background. Only one, I think, NFL player actually died, and that was the wide receiver Chuck Hughes.
Yes,
October
exactly.
1st, 71. Dick Butkus, I guess, of the Bears, was waving frantically.
Exactly.
And Chuck Hughes died of a heart attack, a blood clot, I guess, and he's the first and only NFL player.
So that was, let's say, look at it's literally, 50 years ago. So what happened, and so what has, I mean, that we can figure out how we can talk about it, but one of the biggest things that happened is in 2005, Bennett Amalo he was a neurologist, and he discovered this disease called CTE. And basically, people knew about him, and it was about boxers hitting in their heads so much. And it's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I can't.
Don't worry about it.
No, it's CTE. And so this was the first time that it was identified by a former NFL player, famous player, Mike Webster, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Dr. Malo was a professor at the University of Pittsburgh, and he was interested what happened with Mike, and Mike was basically living in his car. He played 15 years with Pittsburgh, and then when they did the autopsy of his brain, Dr. Malo, discovered this disease called CTE, and people knew about it for boxers, and now this was the first time you really saw it in professional football players. And then Dr. Amano went on to study other brains from professional football players, and the same thing that was happening with CTE, and the impact of the hitting basically creates a lot of problems for people. And Dave Duerson, people who know about Dave as a Chicago Bear player, 11 years, and he basically shot himself in his chest so he could have his family recover his brain to see if CTE was in his body, in his brain. And for sure enough, he was. So, and Dave is really a great guy. I mean, I got to know him, and he was our player rep for the Chicago Bears, and that was one of my teams. And so I got to know Dave, and really great guy, a very smart guy. And then after, this disease came on, he lost it. And then he realized he had to, what his decision was to kill himself. So his brain could be saved by the research people in Harvard and Boston.
Let me add in here, Dave, that you, just so people know, you obviously took a lot of hits playing football. You were played in high school. You were at Syracuse University. You were an All-American. You went.
Yeah, we're national champion teams. Yeah, we were.
And then you played 7 years in the pros,
right?
And then you retired. And you actually had a stroke in the last couple of years, and you are involved in a study at Harvard about brain injuries to football players.
Yes, exactly. And we have, I'm one of the advisors to the study. They're former NFL players, and I'm one of them. And with the union, the NFL Players Association funded the study. It's a 10-year study for $25 million. And it started in 2014. And so, and what the researchers at Harvard, and there's a whole complex of hospitals around Harvard, and Spalding is a major one. They are really looking at the different the consequences of injuries from players, CTE and knee injuries and all that stuff. So it's a major piece because we can now specify and research what is really going on with players now. And certainly when you talk about CTE, CTE basically, or the concussion-induced damage to football players' brains, their life expectancy is 10 years less than regular people. So this is research, this is real search. That's research that is happening with this study, and so NFL players are 10 times more likely to get dementia than regular people. So it's a very tough game, and it's a very violent game. And on the positive side, of course, now, and it was triggered, basically, we can talk a little bit about how the league was denying any consequence of brain damage to players. And finally, they settled $1 billion, and there were 4,400 players were plaintiffs of this lawsuit. And so typically this is what happens, when the lawsuits became because of smoking. That's kind of an analogy of what happened, really. And so players are getting some money now, and a lot of them are pretty damaged because of the concussion, the hits, and the brain damage that happens by playing professional football and college football and high school as well.
Dave, I got to go to, I think, 2 National Football League Players Association conventions with you.
Right.
One in Phoenix or Tucson, and then one in LA.
Yes.
And I also went to a meeting with you one time of retired players.
Right.
I was amazed about how old these guys looked, how many guys had crutches or a cane.
Glimping around.
And then I saw our friend Dave Zirin the other night on CNN talking about the Hamlin injury. And he said that you told him one time that to be in the NFL means to, I think he said, not have a middle age. You went from young to old.
Exactly. That's a good line.
That,
exactly. Yeah.
I was pretty blown away by seeing all these former, top-notch athletes limping around.
Yeah.
And what are the steps that have been taken by the union? After you played pro ball, you were sort of a hippie in Colorado for a while. Then you were doing construction. And next thing you know, you were a union organizer, organizing the Players Association. And you had a lot of contact with a lot of players. The Bears was one of your teams. What steps has the union taken to deal with the prevention of these industries, or to deal with them as they happen?
Well, maybe I'll see if I can put it together. What we did, and basically what we won, I call it we won the war, 11-year war, to establish free agency. And what that means is when a NFL player, when his contract expires, then he can go to any other team and re-sign again with their former team. And the old days, when I played, there was no free agency, and basically we were called neo-slaves, basically. And if you wanted to play football, you had to go to Canada to play over there because they owned you. Basically, they would draft you from college, and I was from Syracuse. I was drafted, and they had you for life. And so the big struggle that we had to happen, and all the major team sports had to do it, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NFL players, all the players, we had to establish free agency. And so that was the biggest thing. So what happens is now the bag of money that is generated in the NFL, put it that, let's say, $20 billion, 50% of that goes for the players, 50% goes to the owners. And what we've done is we chunked out a 25% of our money, the players' money, for services and injury stuff and all the benefits that players get and when they leave the game. And so Gene, our late great leader, Gene Upshaw, basically he knew about players, and he was a 17-year player. And he said, look, you take you say the guys who would want to take all the money say, no, you're going to get a chunk, and then you're going to have a chunk for your benefits. And so these players now, when they leave the game, they can take care of themselves. And many of these players are injured, not just CTE, but joint injuries, back injuries particularly. And so how these players can then take care of themselves and their families after football is done.
I'm going to jump in here. We'll run out of time, but I want to really talk about the game itself. You and I had a long conversation yesterday, and we talked about the love of the game. We actually talked about the love of hitting, the love of making a tackle. Like the few times I got to tackle a quarterback,
exactly,
was really just a great feeling, you know. And particularly a quarterback, you know, we weren't really fond of the quarterbacks. I'm just wondering, what do you think it is? I mean, clearly we're a violent country in a lot of ways. You know, just the game itself. I mean, I start thinking about Rams butting heads. You know, how it's kind of in our DNA, you know, to not only protect ourselves and some, you know, dealing with people who are different than us.
Right.
We're evolving to be a better thing, but in the game of football, the violence is not going to go away. What do you recommend we do?
Well, I'm going to do a real quick history. The game came in 1869, Rutgers and Pittsburgh, first one. It's a combination of soccer and rugby. And then Walter Camp, who was the father of football, basically, he set in the rules about how to do the game. In 1900 to 1905, 45 college players were killed in this playing football, by the way. And so they had to clean it up. Basically, it got very violent, and so that was kind of the survival of the fittest was the idea then, this kind of social Darwinism that was the view. And we're the only country in the world that plays this game. It's got a massive theatric event now, as you see, with the millions and millions and millions of people plug into it. But it's the only, you know, worldwide, it's just Canada a little bit, a little different game. But basically, we're the only country that plays football, basically. So when you look at the history and the militarism that is now in our country, you know, we have more expenditures in military expenditures than the next 20 countries in the world. So when we talk about football as a war game, it is a real world game, because it's about violence, it is about hitting, but underneath that, there is this very almost special feeling about hitting somebody. And I think bulls coming together or people or whatever, that is very attractive. And players, Mike, you played, I played, we really like to play football and hitting people. So we have to really look at what's really real. And of course, you know, and the guys who are playing who are exceptional athletes, and they're now bigger, they're stronger. The weight training has been known for the next past 50 years. You know, every high school football team has a weight room. So that's what's going on. And so when we have to look at this game, it's all about, uh, going attacking the other team and get 6 points and defending that kind of thing. So that's the game. So when we talk about it as a war game, the territorial defense and taking territory, that is the crux of the game, and as
right
as is war. Yeah, and it's our work. This is our American game.
We're running out of time. I just want to let people know that the game will continue. They're playing games now. They're trying to,
and it's an incredible game. It's a wonderful game, but there is damage that is associated with it. And even when we think about what we're doing now in the world, and all the militarism that is with our country, I mean, you have to really think about this stuff.
Well, we're going to continue this discussion as long as you and I are alive.
I hope so.
I'm just telling people that, the NFL now has games in Europe and it has games in Mexico City.
Now.
It's trying to expand. And Dave Meggysey has been around the game a long time. He wrote a great book called Out of Their League. And that book is reported by Sports Illustrated to be one of the 100 best sports books ever. I recommend that everyone read it. Dave, we love you, and we'll be
talking. You too, baby. You love you, brother. And so let's keep. Yeah, if people are interested, you can get it. You can contact me too through Mike, and because when you go Google it right now, you'll see all the things that happened with Damar, and there's a lot of people, are concerned about it with grandparents and parents. Should my kid play this game? Because there's damage associated with this game. It's a violent game.
If people want to know, there's a guy named Matt Cheney who Dave turned me on to. We had him on the show, but he has a lot of details about concussions, injuries, like he's a fanatic for the history.
So there's a literature about that, or people want to get into it, and there's some really good writing about these issues because, sports is reflected with a particular society, and United States society is reflected in football.
Okay, Dave, thanks a lot. And we'll be talking to you soon. Everybody else, we want to thank you for tuning in. I want to thank our guest, Dave Meggysey, talking football. I want to thank our guest, Keyshawn Whitehorse, talking bull riding. Next week, we've got Nick Ward, a candidate for the 48th Ward Alderman. We probably have someone else too. We encourage you all to check out this show, any of our shows. Go to youtube.com/Heartland Media or Google or Spotify podcasts. And I want to thank Katie Hogan, Tom Clark, Al James, Lynn Orman, everybody who's involved with the show, everyone over at WLUW. Have a good week. There's a lot going on in the world. Pay attention. Pay attention to what's going on in Congress. Think about how we make things better, how we build up the progressive forces in the world. And we'll be seeing you next week with more Live from the Heartland on the left end of your dial or anytime at YouTube, Spotify, etc.